Okay, croeso, noswaith dda. Hello and welcome to everyone watching us here in Wales, around the UK, wherever you might be in the world today. I hope you've been enjoying Out of Focus Festival so far. There's been so many great sessions. I know I've been enjoying lots of them, and I hope that you'll really enjoy the conversation that we'll be having with you over the next hour today. Really thrilled to be joined by Sean and Dan today, and very shortly they'll be telling us a little bit more about themselves. For those of you who are new to Zoom, tuning in for the first time, we really want this to be a conversation, not just between us, but between all of us watching at home as well. So by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens or the chat, you can reach out, share your thoughts, your comments, your questions with us, and we'll pick those up and we'll answer them and discuss them as we go along tonight. So do feel free to do that whenever you might have a question or something that you want to share. And it's a huge topic. There's lots we want to explore tonight, so we're going to jump straight in. But just to start, I'm going to ask if Sean and Dan can briefly tell us a little bit about who they are, where they work, and what they do. So Dan, I'm going to come to you first, if I may.
Sure, absolutely. First of all, hi everybody. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Sean. Thank you to Out of Focus for having me. My name is Dan Koplowitz. I am halfway across the world in Los Angeles, California. I run a sync agency called Friendly Fire Licensing, and I represent the catalogs of about 40 or 50 different record labels and publishing companies from around the world, as well as individual artists like Sean here. My job is I work to get their music placed into TV shows, movies, commercials, video games, and the like.
Amazing. And Sean?
Hello, everybody. My name is Sean Trevor. I write music for a living. I'm based in Cardiff, between Cardiff and Berlin, but at the moment, for obvious reasons, just stuck in Cardiff. Yeah, I started working with Dan a little while ago now,
More than a little while ago, yeah.
Yeah, right. So yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. And we'll be talking a little bit more about some of those experiences you two have had of working together as we go along tonight. Just before we jump into that, I'm well aware that there's going to be a real mixture of people tuning in today. There'll be some people who have had lots of experience of sync and licensing across many different channels over many years. There'll be other people who are hearing some of these words and thinking about some of these ideas for the first time. So just before we jump in, I'm going to ask Dan if you could give us the 1-minute beginner's guide to sync. No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. Are you actually timing me?
3, 2, 1.
All right, there we go. So the real nutshell version of it, and we can dig into some of the nitty gritty over the course of the panel. But sync, which is short for synchronization, in its broadest sense is anytime you pair audio with video, when you match music to a moving image. So anytime you get a song into a TV show, a movie, a commercial, an online ad, a video game, any of those things is a sync or synchronization. And these are by and large, with the notable exception of television in the UK, which we can talk about a little bit, these are negotiated uses. You can't just use music for free. So anytime you place a sync, you're actually doing 2 different licenses. One is for the recording, the master composition, what you have when you actually went into the studio and banged out a track. And the other is for the underlying composition, the publishing. So think of as if you had sat down and written out the lyrics and the notes and the chord changes. When I'm placing a sync, I'm working on securing a license for both the master and the composition. Generally, they belong to the same artist, unless they've given those rights away. So if I'm working with an artist who controls all their own rights, there's a concept in sync called one stop, meaning that I'm pitching, I can go to one person and get, if someone wants to use a song, it's basically one phone call away. But of course, if you've signed a publishing deal, or worked with someone else to assign your rights with a different rights holder, then suddenly it gets a little more complicated and you have more cooks in the kitchen, as it were. We can go a lot deeper if you want, but that's the super, super quick and dirty version of what a sync is.
I'm sure we're going to go much deeper over the next 45 minutes or so, but that's such a helpful introduction just to set the scene for us, I think. And a few points which we're definitely going to come back and revisit. And again, everyone watching, if there's any point where we say something and you're not quite sure what we mean, or if there's anything where we go a little bit too quickly and you want us to come back, do tell us and we'll revisit things and we'll take your questions. Sean, I'll come to you next though, because you mentioned when you introduced yourself that you and Dan go way back. So perhaps to start us thinking about how people go from having the master, having the composition, and creating these sync relationships. We could use the example of you guys. How did you come to work together? What sort of things have you worked together on? Tell us that story.
Well, I guess, I mean, as Dan mentioned, we're going back a little while now, so some of the details might be a little bit hazy. But if I recall, we were introduced by somebody I was working with locally. Is that right, Dan? I think it was Kieran. Yeah, right. Kieran Jones introduced us. And what preceded that was I'd not long started just recording in general, really. I was performing before that, so I was a touring musician, basically. Recording, but the other side of the glass. And I think it was for about, I don't know, maybe 6-7 months full on, just kind of putting together tracks, learning the ropes with recording, but also kind of, when you perform, but you don't kind of know how to record, you accrue sort of like an entourage of ideas. And basically it all came splurging out in that sort of 7-month period where it was a crash course for me, basically, in terms of recording, in terms of kind of just putting tracks together, the technological aspect of it, basically, the technical aspect. So I was putting effectively just tracks together with a view to moving into writing for screen. But I wasn't particularly precious about the genre or anything like that. I mean, with this specific avenue of what I wanted to do, I was as interested in just getting a feel for, for the process as much as anything else. But I'd accrued enough tracks and had started working with Kieran on a few things, and a company Kieran was working for at the time as well. And then I think the company folded, and Kieran, in this heroic, kind of martyr-like way, just said, Dan meet Sean, Sean meet Dan. Okay, and then vanished off the face of the earth. I haven't heard from Kieran since. I hope you're well, Kieran. You let us know if you need help.
Yeah, I hope he's out there. Haven't heard from him either.
Yeah, right.
Although I do still work with some of the artists who it was a publishing company, and some of those artists I continue to work with and represent, actually.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. We might have a few friends in common, I suspect, there, Dan. Yeah, they're good people, if I remember. Yeah, they're really good people. But yeah, so then Kieran sort of like just put us both together, and I think it took a little while for me to kind of put tracks together and send them over to you, Dan. You were very patient, I think is the word I would use with me, just in terms of like listening to my stuff. But then eventually when I sent some stuff over to Dan, that's when this whole process, I think, started to get underway, and I started having a bit of an insight into the syncing process from a creating perspective. So, yeah.
It's something I would add to that, which is one of the reasons I was really delighted to meet Sean and work with him, other than the fact that he's just a lovely fellow. And obviously one of the two of us is a musician. And I mean, of course it's me, because you can see I have a gong here in the back.
That's pretty good, man. Yeah, record that. Record that.
Absolutely. It's my hourly rates are very reasonable. I bang this gong every time I get a sync license.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's looking a little dusty there, then. It's looking a bit dusty over there.
That's another conversation. One of the reasons I was happy to be introduced to Sean, who, since he's modest, I'll say it on his behalf, is an extraordinary musician and very adept at creating to pitch. I largely work with, let's call it catalog music, by which I mean it's really a bit of a misnomer because that implies old dusty tracks, and that's not the case at all. I'm working with music that has already been recorded, that is good to go. I have fairly broad and diverse library, but these are songs that are finished. At the most, maybe there's an instrumental available or a remix or stems, but people generally, I find myself pitching, someone says, we're working on a project, we need a hip hop track. What do you got? And I'm going through my catalog and I'm hand selecting 3 or 5 or 10 already recorded tracks. That's all well and good, but and Sean and I have worked together in that way with songs that he's already done that are sort of done and dusted. They've been locked, and in theory, if the song is right, it can just be plopped right into a project. But there are a fair number of opportunities to do custom and bespoke work, and this is where I think Sean really shines. This is not an ability that everyone has, and it kind of comes with its own set of rules and customs when you're doing custom work. But one of the things that I found is just fantastic is that I remember, Sean, there was a time, this must have been in the case in the span of not more than 48 hours, and I had 2 different custom things for you, and they couldn't have been more different from one another. I think one of them wanted a kind of dark, brooding, slow burn track that sounded like the XX, and then someone wanted it was like a Scott Joplin style, old timey ragtime piano, something you'd hear in a Wild West saloon. I mean, these music needs couldn't have been more different from one another, and there was a ticking clock on both of them. It's not as if we had a whole lot of time. And one of the things that really impressed me is I could go to Sean and he delivered these 2 separate and distinct pieces of music, and they both nailed it. I mean, each one of them was for what was requested was perfect. I think working in sync and having that ability to either create something completely out of the blue, or take an already existing piece and edit it, amend it, change it as needed, it's really a superpower. And it's one of the things that I'm grateful for with my working relationship with Sean, is his ability to do that sort of on the fly.
Got me a little bit emotional here, there, Dan. The head will start filling the cap a little bit too much, yeah. But yeah.
What's that creative process like from your perspective, Sean, when you're given a brief and it's totally out there and totally different to what you were asked to do last time? How do you get your mind into a place where you can create in a way which might have been so different to the way you created the week before?
Well, I guess there are a few different facets to that. One is the long-term thing. So I did a lot of performances as a kid, but in my teens as well. And it was 1 minute it was classical kind of piano concerts. Then it was sort of like, drumming for metal bands. It was kind of like the full range, R&B, like keys. It was really sort of a span in terms of the genres. So I was, lucky in a way, but I think it starts with something more fundamental than that. It starts with genuinely having respect for all genres, and in terms of the creative process, I think it's more of a psychological thing. Whatever the brief is, in terms of stylistically speaking, there are good and bad examples of within the style, right? There are good and bad examples of most genres. So you kind of you go for the stuff that's good, right? You go for the stuff that you love. So that's one aspect of it. Another aspect is you have to care. It's a tricky one, but by now it's not even an issue. Like, I mean, whatever the project is, somewhere along the line, someone cares about that film or about that project, like regardless of what the genre is, or, I've had some interesting ones, right? I think the ones that jump to mind is, La Bamba covers and stuff like this. But at some stage, somebody really cared about the project. So part of it is like the Stanislavskian sort of, you got to put yourself in the mindset of somebody who really, really cares about it, and then the rest is kind of just experience funneled and kind of just manifest in what you do. So yeah, there's experience comes into play, but it's also being a little fearless but respectful of the genre at the same time. You know, like that Scott Joplin thing, for example, I wouldn't have touched it if I didn't kind of have a bit of a background in stride piano myself. Same for the XX thing. I wouldn't have done it had I not played in an electro band and all of this stuff. You know, you do have to have respect for the music. But I think, yeah, that's where I'm coming at. That's where I'm coming from at it. It doesn't kind of explain you know, like quite why I'm okay doing Gregorian chant 1 minute and hardcore rave the next. But at the same time, yeah, I'm up for it. You know, I'm up for it.
I mean, I think the other thing that's important to bear in mind in these things is that the music is driven by the picture. So you are given a brief. So you're working with a director, and this applies, you know, whether it's you know, an award-winning independent art house film or whether it's an advertisement for chicken nuggets. I mean, it doesn't matter. They have the film, you know, they have the video, and they're aiming for a certain feel. And I think part of it is being able to think on your feet and give them what they need while still sort of giving it, let's say, you know, artistic credibility.
Yeah.
I think, and I deal with this both with custom things and in general. There's a saying that I've always loved, which is, you know, I'm sure you guys have heard, which is, you know, writing about music is like dancing about architecture. And I get briefs in on a regular basis, and, you know, it's people saying what they're looking for. And sometimes, of course, the briefs are deeply specific. I mean, they can be incredibly detailed. There might be reference tracks. There might, you know, it might be very clear that there's a certain song that they're trying to replace that they can't afford. It's, you know, it's not uncommon if someone wants that. They obviously wanted Bruno Mars or Coldplay, and they can't afford that. And they want something that's as close to Bruno Mars or Coldplay as can be. You know, other times you have these incredibly vague and kind of stupid, meaningless, oh, we want energy and build and resolution, which is, I mean, I don't know, that's such a bullshit way to describe things, because it means nothing.
What's
it
the
means
perfect...
everything, and therefore means nothing. And so the challenge, and it is more, I'm sure Sean will agree, it's more of an art than a science, is using what is sometimes sort of a limited set of information or a limited set of prompts or directives, and yet being able to give them something that you think that they want. And there can be back and forth, obviously. I mean, this is one of the advantages of doing something custom. You know, if someone comes to me and they want I have this sometimes. You know, they're working on a show that takes place in the 70s. They say we can't have any music from after 1974. And so, you know, either I have the right track or I don't, because at that point, you know, the odds of being able to get something from 1971 into Pro Tools and editing and tweaking it are pretty slim. So it's either, you know, here's 3 tracks. Do they work or do they not work? One of the advantages of working with Sean is, you know, they can say, okay, well, this track is great, but here's the thing. There's a, I don't know, there's a flugelhorn at the 42-second mark. We got to get rid of that. You know, or whatever, change it.
It stays. It stays. The flugelhorn stays. Dan. You know.
Absolutely. That ability to really craft it, and it's something you see particularly in ads and in trailers. You know, when it's a TV show, I mean, it depends, but you know, certainly there's a lot of projects where, you know, the honest truth is they say, okay, you know, it's a scene, it's at a bar. Really, all we're looking for is some music that's kind of playing unobtrusively in the background to sort of establish the vibe of it being a bar. They're not that particular. But, you know, if you go and you watch a film trailer, you go really any trailer for a major Hollywood film, you'll notice that the music is, I mean, to the millisecond, is really kind of queued up to match the picture. They don't just take a song and kind of slap it on the trailer. That would be a really poorly done trailer. I mean, so in these cases where we work on trailers, we'll get notes, you know, at the 7-second mark, we need to change this, and at the 9-second mark, we need to change this, and we need a transition at the 14-second mark. Whereas plenty of other times, it's just say, hey, this song's great. we'll slap it over the end credits, or we'll toss it in the background, and perfect. And you don't have to be quite as fussy about it. But having that ability to fine tune and tweak and edit, I think is what gives someone like Sean an advantage over artists who don't have the capability of doing that on short notice.
It's a tricky one for me as well to gauge, because I don't know any other way really. I mean, like and I still am recording, stuff for the sake of creating music, but I find, I don't really know how other people do it either, and I don't know, it's very difficult for me to establish a barometer between, what am I trying to say exactly? When I put something in for a pitch and it doesn't come off, for example, it's very difficult for me to gauge, like my success ratios against like a pre-recording artist, for example, or against a library, So it's a difficult one for me to gauge as well. So this is super instructive for me to hear what you got to say there, Dan. And you could just keep on inflating my head a little bit.
We're going to go to a question from one of the viewers in a moment, but just before we do, Dan was talking about what can be a really constructive or a really useless brief that you might get from a client. From your perspective, Sean, what's a great brief where you see it and think, yeah, I can already hear that in my own head. I've just got to create it. And what leaves you scratching your head?
Well, it's so far nothing's left me scratching my head. And I think maybe that's either fearlessness or stupidity, and you can make your own mind up about that. I think it's more, when the interactions, when you do get a bite, then it's more the ease or the difficulty of a job is based on your interaction with the director, be it through Dan sometimes, but that's when a job is more difficult or easier, really. So I wouldn't say that a nightmare brief exists just yet. Yes, okay. So if things are ambiguous in terms of what they're asking, but actually they know what they want, then they should have probably just asked for what they want in the first place. I think for me the difficulty is with people who maybe purport to be open-minded about what they want, but actually they know exactly what they want, and we're just kind of going a roundabout way. By now I think probably Dan, Dan, you can speak for yourself on this, but like you can kind of fish them out. But stylistically, no. I mean,
if you work with someone long enough, you start to learn their language. I have, again, they're briefs that are so detailed, and they're briefs that are a sentence long. It's worth mentioning too that these decisions are often made by, I don't want to say by committee, that makes it sound a little more corporate than it is, but there's a variety of stakeholders. There's multiple links in the chain. My job as a sync agent is I'm not getting paid, but Netflix or the ad agencies aren't paying me. My job is, is to represent Sean and represent my artists and labels. But I'm often, working with, a counterpart, a music supervisor who is being paid. Their job is find the right song for this scene. But they don't necessarily have the final say. And this comes up time and again in conversations with friends of mine who are music supervisors. These people might have the most incredible encyclopedic musical knowledge in the world, which is something that's incredible. But they have to run the music choices by the director of the show. And the director might have atrocious taste, or they might have just really have got it into their head. They want this artist, and they're going to throw a temper tantrum if they can't. If it's a commercial, same deal. It might be a hip, edgy, emerging artist, but there might be a boardroom somewhere with a significantly older and less hip people saying, no, let's just go for something safe. So budgetary considerations come into it. So there's so many factors that weigh in on what song ends up being chosen. All you can really do to a certain degree is get them the best track you can and kind of hope it fits. And then if it doesn't, you just sort of have to take your lumps and move on. And you can't, I have never in my career and never would tell someone, you know, cut this song in as a favor to me. I mean, if the track's not right for the scene, the track's not right. It's not really it's not a criticism of the track. It just means that it doesn't match
Totally.
the image.
Totally. And that's one of the joys of working with Dan as well, is that especially if it's a tight turnaround, and I appreciate it's not always applicable to the pre-records, but if it's a tight turnaround on a bespoke, then your head's a little fried, you know. I mean, you're also working on America time. It's known as America time, which means that I'll probably start very late in the evening through to the early hours and finish a job and send it over to you overnight. You know, it's kind of nice to know that worst case scenario, and you know, the coffee's gone to my head too much, and you know, I'm kind of, music's quite not up to par. I also have trust in Dan to tell me, okay, well, I mean, it's not quite right, you know, all of this stuff. I mean, touch wood, it doesn't really happen all that often, but at the same time, there's an understanding there, and I have the utmost faith that you know, that he's got my back in that respect as well, because it's also my name on the track, you know, as well as his. So it's, yeah, it's nice to know that we're both equally invested in getting it right, you know.
And we can have second chances sometimes. I mean, Sean, there have been tracks, I feel, I mean, Collisions, right? The song that we had in Spinning Out, the Netflix show about, it's an ice skating show, and it's a really beautiful usage. That was, you know, that was not written for the show. That was completely for another project.
Yeah. And
yet it worked for this one. So, I mean, I think this is one of the things that I really love about it. If a piece of music, if it's a good piece of music, you'll find a place for it eventually. I experienced this. I'll send songs. Sometimes I'll have a track, you know, maybe it's like a really, really cool electronic track, and I'll send it to a supervisor, and they'll love it, but they'll say, you know, I'm working on the show I'm working on is looking for all, you know, old timey jazz. I can't use this, but they file it away. As long as you've made sure that you've tagged it with your metadata and made sure they know how to get a hold of you. It's interesting. I mean, the analogy I use when you're pitching this stuff out is you're planting seeds. You're sprinkling seeds in the garden and watering them. Some of them will sprout up right away. Some of them will never sprout ever. And some of them will just sit there, you know, dormant for a year, and then suddenly out of the blue, someone will say. And I feel like that's what happened with Collisions and Spinning Out, is this track that had been done for a completely separate and unrelated thing kind of found a second life in this case. Because it, you know, may not have worked for the original thing, but it worked beautifully for this project.
In fact, I wonder if not like most of the stuff that we do together, it kind of falls into that category, you know. I mean, like, yeah. I'm trying to remember something that I pitched on directly that actually. Yeah, I think most of it happens, you know, as kind of tracks that I did for something else that kind of came off for another pitch further down the line.
Well, because they go into the library when you send us something.
Yeah, totally.
We tag it, you know, internally. We genre and style and tempo and all of these things, and you know, assuming that the track hasn't been used and sort of sold as a work for hire to someone else. I mean, assuming that from a legal standpoint, it's still available to pitch. So in that sense, even a quote unquote failed project, even a swing and a miss, is still, you know, I don't view it as wasted time, because these things, you know, can and do find second life.
Totally.
Yeah. I'm gonna throw to our questions now, because we've had a couple of things coming through. The first one here is for you, Dan. So this is, what is the best way to approach sync agencies such as yours? Do you have a policy of not accepting unsolicited material? As a singer-songwriter with a large back catalogue of recorded material, I've tried emailing companies, but I never get a reply.
Other than bribery, which works fantastically. Yeah, I think it's a fair question, and let me start by saying two things that hopefully aren't contradictory. First of all, I at least am absolutely open to checking out new music. We try to listen to every single thing we get. Also, the sort of general advice I give to people is, please understand we're extremely busy. I don't say that out of a sense of inflated self-importance or anything like that. I deal with this as well, because I too am pitching music to people, the catalog that I represent, and I'm going to music supervisors on a daily basis, kind of, knocking on their door saying, hey, I have some music for you. I hope you like it. It's rare to get feedback. I know that, if I'm not getting detailed feedback from a music supervisor, it's not because they're a jerk, and it's not necessarily because they hate the music. It's because if they spend all of their time responding to that, they in turn, again, we're all links on a chain. They have a director breathing down their neck. They have 100 things that they have to deal with. All that being said, I think there's a few the pointers for how to reach out to a sync agent. Couple things. I mean, I think everyone, most people to one degree or another are creatures of ego. We like to know that we aren't just being kind of copy pasted on an email that's going out to 1 million people. When I reach out to music supervisors, I try and find out what projects they've been working on. If I see a show that I really like, I watch the end credits and I see who chose the music. And then I can write them and I say, oh, I thought the song you had in the ending montage in this episode was extraordinary. And by the way, here's some music that I have that might fit. For the love of God, get their name right. Basic things like that. Another thing that, anyone who's seen me do panels before will know that I harp on this almost to the point of annoyance. So I apologize, because I realize it's not a sexy topic, but metadata and rights ownership. If I hear something and I like it, and I think I can pitch this, the first question I'm going to ask is, who owns this? Are you, if you're an independent artist, did you make this yourself? Are you your own label? Have you assigned your rights? Are you published by Universal? Did you use a sample in the song that you haven't gotten legal permission to clear? Those are all the things I'm going to ask. Because that's critical from a business perspective. I need to know who do I have to talk to pitch this. If it's tied up with a major label, we work on a commission basis, it might be harder, if not impossible, for us to pitch. I strongly suggest I use a program called disco.ac. It's like a content management system. I adore them. There's others. There's Sync Tank. There's Source Audio. But if you're sending music, keep it tidy. And then the analogy I use is, if you're at a restaurant, don't just dump a bunch of slop on a plate. Plate it nicely and present it well. Include, if it's an MP3, don't do 30 megabytes of attachments. Do a link. Include a streaming link. Append your email address to the MP3, because often I'll download stuff, and the honest truth of the matter is I might download it and then get around to listening to it 9 days later. And if the songs haven't been titled and the artist name isn't there and the contact information isn't there, and it's presented in a really sloppy manner, even if I love it, I don't know who to get a hold of. So I think, I think finally, this is the same deal when I'm pitching to supervisors. I'm operating on the assumption that if I'm lucky, I'll get, 3 to 5 minutes of their time. So lead with the best track or two. If it's a SoundCloud page, lead with, say, here are 3 songs that I've done. I have more if you want. And I sort of trust that if someone hears something and really is doing cartwheels over it, they'll say, hell yeah, send me more. But kind of saying here, I've had people write me and say, here is a Dropbox link of sort of the raw WAV files of every piece of music I've ever done in my entire life. It's a 9 gigabyte download. Have fun with that. It's just realistically, it ain't gonna happen. I think following up is fine. I think I'm of the mindset that as a sync agent, I try to do right by the people who have put the hard work into making music and getting in touch.
Yeah.
I do try and listen. When I'm able to, I try and get back with feedback. But the fact of the matter is, most of my time is tied up with actually pitching the music the material that I already represent and sort of listening to new stuff it's kind of a off hours, after hours, once I've gotten, that's the dessert once I've eaten my vegetables is getting to check out new stuff. And then finally, I'll say, I mean, my email address is dan@friendlyfirelicensing.com. I mean, it's no secret. I try to be accessible. So in that sense, I welcome people reaching out as long as they do understand that we're a tiny little 2-person company. So if we don't get back to you right away, please don't think it's because we're jerks, because we're really not jerks, I promise.
I think that's incredibly sound advice for everyone listening. And the main thing I took away from all those points you just made was, keep it simple. make the person's job as easy as it can possibly be that you're sending the information to. And don't forget that at the other end of the email or the other end of the phone is another person who's as passionate about the music industry as you are. And so even though we all have different roles to play here, we're all playing the same game at the end of the day, and we all want one another to win. We've had another question, closely connected actually, and I think this is for you as well, Dan. So this is from Paul. Great session, guys. Thanks, Paul. Just wanted to ask Dan if he tends to target artists and companies to work with, or is he open to receiving music from people? So I think we've kind of touched upon that just now, actually.
Yeah, I mean, to answer the second part first, yes, open to receiving music from people. We all have our personal tastes, which are to a certain degree are just kind of inextricable from what we do. I'm not a metal guy. I'm just not. I'm just never going to be. I still have some metal and some heavier stuff in the catalog because sometimes a situation calls for that. Of course, there are the things that I hear and they excite my ears. I just say, wow, I have to pitch this because I feel passionate about it. I try not to pitch stuff that I don't feel passionate about. You also have to, you wear the sync hat a little bit, and syncability and quality I view them as a Venn diagram. I try and work with the stuff that falls in the middle of stuff that's really good and also really like syncable. But there are some, it's probably not a shocking or controversial statement to say that, like avant-garde free jazz is very hard to get into a commercial for laundry detergent. I mean, obviously sorry, Sean, I know it's
You didn't tell me that before I pitched, did you? You didn't tell me that.
There are certain styles and themes that of course do better. There's always sort of various flavors of the month last year, Lizzo was, at least in the States, was so big. And I mean, the number of briefs I got where it's very clear that they just wanted a Lizzo song and they couldn't afford it. Or various styles, lyrical themes, especially when you're dealing with ads, stuff about family, non-romantic love, friendship, togetherness. I mean, over the course of the last 6 or 7 months, as we've been dealing with COVID, I can't tell you how many briefs I've gotten that are looking for songs about resilience, home, better tomorrow, making it through, brand new day, courage, caring. It makes sense. I think sometimes songs can be almost a little too clever for their own good lyrically. Dylan is great. Bob Dylan is great, but if you have a song that's kind of telling this rambling story, it doesn't necessarily work in the context of a 15-second or a 10-second use. And those things you kind of have to bang the theme pretty. Yeah, it has to be pretty on the nose. All that being said, I'm a big believer, if you're an artist, write the music that you write. Not everyone does. Sean, I think, is an exception to the rule in his ability to do stuff for sync really well. There's plenty of artists who work in a different way and, kind of have, come with an album. They say, this is my finished album. And for artists like that, I tell them, writing to sync, writing with a specific goal of getting something synced, can be dicey, because I think a lot of people have a pretty good, they can kind of smell out fakery a little bit. So make the music that you make. And if it's weird or it's artsy or it's a little left field, have faith that there are still opportunities out there for weird, artsy, left field music. They may not come down the road as often, but our specialty, I would say, what we're probably known for at Friendly Fire Licensing is weird fucking music. And as much as I get plenty of briefs looking for just a upbeat, energetic, swaggery rock song, and that's all well and good, what I really like is when I get a brief that's looking for, vintage fuzzy psych rock or Mongolian throat singing or whatever. There is a place for it. And so if you have music that's, for lack of a better term, not mainstream, great, send it along. If it's good, maybe we'll only have an opportunity to pitch it once, but that one time might be the perfect time.
And this is a question from me for both of you really, and the folks watching, do keep sending your questions in. We really appreciate it. This is all about you guys at the end of the day. In terms of what you've been able to achieve through sync licensing, both of you, do you have a proudest moment or a proudest achievement? Sean, maybe I could throw that to you first.
I think it's, and this kind of extends a little bit to what Dan was saying. It's all part of, not to call it the grind in a drudging sense, but it's all part of an ongoing trajectory, an ongoing kind of path, really, And so, yeah, it was great to land the Collisions track on the Netflix show. But I mean, once you landed it, okay, well, let's just keep moving and kind of, you can't stay still, really. You can't be precious and you can't stay still, and you got to care. Those are the three. And good luck, good luck with them three. But that's the truth of it, So not so much a proudest moment. I'm a big believer in nurturing good relationships to the point of friendship. I'd consider Dan a friend by now, and this is where you tell me that no, stay.
Wow, no, I have no idea what you're friend. I can barely stand the guy, if we're gonna be really honest.
Yeah, you and the rest of the world. But yeah, so I wouldn't say a proudest moment, but like I believe in nurturing relationships that kind of feed into an ongoing career, basically. So yeah, as soon as something great happens, wonderful, but let's make something better happen is how I operate, really.
So not dwelling on the present for too long, keeping your eyes on the future. Well,
I mean, I think that applies to the music as much as anything else. You've got to keep progressing. And if you feel like you've done all the progressing that you can do, then I think you're probably in the wrong industry. Truth be told, especially. Do
you see your music progressing through the work you're doing to brief? If you look back at is working to order in this way allowing your music to creatively develop as opposed to putting a constraint on you?
Totally. Well, I mean, I think it's worth mentioning that, I mean, yes, sync is sort of an important aspect of what I do, but I think all in all, it probably makes about 20 to 30% of my income all in all. Most of it is commission-based stuff. So even though like the cool stuff and the stuff that I'm going to put on the CV, most of that stuff will happen with Dan. There's also other aspects. So they all feed into each other in that sense, really. But I think, yeah, the fast briefs kind of give you a couple of shortcuts just stylistically to kind of fulfill certain, certain requirements. But yeah. It's a really good question. I think production, there's always something to improve, basically, and I think this is probably one of the most constructive ways of doing it.
And to throw that same question to you, Dan, when you look back at all the artists you've worked with, all the organizations, all the places you've helped artists get their music, are there any one or two that spin to your mind of, yeah, I was really proud of that one?
I mean, I have dozens. The fact of the matter is, a lot of this, when you work in sync, it is a lot of banging your head against the wall. It is a lot of the seeds that you plant don't sprout because there's so much music out there. There's just so much music. So you're up against a lot of competition. But I mean, I love it. I love it when I'm able to get a really unusual or out there song into something. I mean, I talked about old psych rock. I mean, I managed to get this is one of my favorite stories. I managed to get you know the show Mr. Robot? I managed to get a vintage Cambodian language psych rock cover of Nancy Sinatra, Bang Bang, My Baby Shot Me Down.
That was you, Dan.
That was me.
That was you, no way. That's great. That's good. Yeah.
So Sean, I guess, has seen that episode. It was in the season of one of the seasons of Mr. Robot.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
And I mean, it was the hoops. The hoops we had to jump through for that. I mean, first, the publishing had to be cleared. Sonny Bono wrote the song, and that was actually the easy part because, without getting too into it, the song, the artist whose name was Panron was killed by the Khmer Rouge, by the Cambodian regime. And so asserting legal ownership of the track required actually basically finding a bilingual fixer essentially in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, and getting the Cambodian government involved. I mean, I have a document with the Cambodian Minister of Culture giving permission to use this song. I mean, so the hoops we had to jump through. This was not just, oh, here's a song for a scene in a bar. This was, I mean, one of those email chains with 200 emails back and forth. Yeah, but when the end result happens and you see it, and here's this special, bizarre, unique piece of music in a really, pivotal scene in a great show, and it's just, when those pieces come together, it's the best feeling in the world. It's just an extraordinary feeling. It's great to be able to call up an artist and say, hey, someone wants to use your song. I mean, both because it's hopefully a little chunk of change for them. And beyond that, I do believe, listen, not every TV show is great. So, sometimes it's in just a crummy reality show. But I do think that, music enhances art. Music can enhance film, and film can enhance music as well. And when you have a really powerful song and a really powerful scene, it's just like they end up being more than the sum of their parts, as I see it. It's just an incredibly satisfying feeling.
That also extends a little bit, I think, and I know I'm kind of going against sort of my own, but I also cordon off time for my own music, kind of non-brief driven stuff. But I think what you were just saying then, there is a perfect moment for some pieces, isn't there? Or at least, that's one of the joys of working with supervisors, that they can really kind of reframe a track in a totally alien context, and it worked incredibly. And I think Mr. Robot was fantastic for doing that. Like those Philip Glass organ pieces, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. I was like, what? That's the joys of music supervision. But I think that when you said kind of do your own thing, I think that I would also echo that. I'd also I'd stress that. Yes, okay, sort of. It's great being a chameleon in some senses, but I do sometimes wonder, and this is kind of me taking the opportunity to use this as a psychiatry session. I do sometimes wonder if, well, up until a certain point, being chameleonic is useful, and with the brief driven stuff, yes, it's incredibly useful. But after a certain point, you want to know what your voice is, right? And people are probably if they're gonna really want you, they're going to want you because of your voice, not necessarily your capacity to kind of sound, to kind of like draw on other genres, So I think what Dan was saying about doing your own thing, that makes complete sense. Yeah. And that authenticity you're talking about as well, that's really going to shine through in moments like that, like the Mr. Robot sync, you know. I mean, yeah, I think it made a lot of sense what you were saying, Dan.
And it's fascinating because when you're sitting on the sofa watching the TV and there's a piece of music and a piece of art, and when it's done well, they seem so organic that you think the music's just playing there in the bar and it just happens to be on because it all just feels right. And you have no idea how much work had to go into making that happen. And it's amazing to hear you being able to sort of piece that together for us, just with one example.
The number of conversations I've had with people outside the music industry who, you know, I'll tell them what I do, and they say, "Oh, wow, you know, I never really thought about that." Every single time I see a TV show with music in it, that was that was an artistic decision. It was a business negotiation. You know, behind the scenes, each song and each scene, each song and each ad. But you know, sort of, you know, when you learn how the sausage is made, there's a lot of stuff happening beneath the surface, which I find fascinating.
What goes into the sausage then?
You don't want to know.
Okay.
We've had another question come through, so thanks for keep sending them through, guys. So I'd say this one's for both of you. So does it help to be a multi-instrumentalist, or are lyric-driven singer-songwriters able to make a good career out of this? I enjoy writing lyrics to a brief, but I'm fairly tied to a style and a genre. Who'd like to take that one up first?
You go for it, Dan. Yeah, you go for it.
I mean, does it help to be a multi-instrumentalist? Sure, of course. Lyrics are, I mean, Sean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think of you as a lyricist first and foremost. Sorry, I think of you as an instrumentalist.
Totally, yeah. I can't write lyrics for shit. You know, I try. I can't write them for shit.
No, I can't. Listen, my mother's an opera singer, and when I sing, glass cracks. So I mean, it's not a skill that I possess. Lyric music and instrumental music both have a place in sync. That's the short and easy answer. There are things for which lyrical songs absolutely won't work because let's say it's an ad and there's voiceover, or it's a scene in a TV show and it's really dialogue heavy. For the exact same reason, there are cases in which purely instrumental music won't work because they really want something that hammers home a certain theme or touches on certain things, or where it's just, you know, maybe an ad where they want that, maybe there's no voiceover, there's no narration, so they really want the music to kind of do the heavy lifting there. One thing I'll say, and I realize this maybe isn't quite the question that was asked, but I feel is worth mentioning, is that if you are writing lyric music, when you're recording, get instrumentals. Always have instrumentals on hand, always have stems. Because there are absolutely times, I mean, the biggest bummer in the world is losing out on a sync. Someone says, I love this song, I want to use it. Can you get us an instrumental, please? Because we want to use an instrumental version of it. And having to say, oh, I'm sorry, you know, the artist doesn't have it, or it's going to take 2 weeks to master. So if you're doing lyric music, when you're in the studio doing it, you know, take that extra hour or two and you know, bounce out the instrumentals, have them mastered and have them ready to go. But yeah, I mean, I certainly think that if you're a lyricist, lyrical music gets used all the time, and we, on a regular basis, I find myself pitching for songs that are about things that touch on various lyrical subjects. So good lyrics are a huge plus to me. And even although I was talking earlier about the Bob Dylan-y, long, meandering, you know, how lyrics can be too clever for their own good, even then there's exceptions to the rule. I was speaking in the context of sort of advertisements where you really, it's like you have 10 seconds to get the point across. There are plenty of times when there's a longer, less, you know, more artistic use, and, you know.
It makes me think straight away of John Cooper Clarke at the end of the Sopranos. No.
Absolutely.
I'm working my way through it now, Mike. I'm a little late to the party on the Sopranos, so you just don't spoiler it too much.
I won't tell you what happens.
Don't
You've
tell
had
me.
20 years, Sean.
I mean, we all know what happened to Gandolfini, and rest his soul. But yeah, just don't be careful. Tread soft.
I mean, I actually, since you brought it up, this is a great. I represent Alabama 3. So the song from the theme song of The Sopranos.
Right.
Again, I'm not going to try and sing it, but woke up this morning. That has, I mean, I certainly can't claim to have placed that song. I think I was still in college when that happened. But they originally the show wanted to use a different song, and the artist said, "Nah, we don't want to do it. We don't believe in syncs." Well, that song has basically, I mean, that's put their kids through university, and I mean, still to this day, we had that song in a TV show maybe a year ago because the character in the TV show was watching The Sopranos.
No way. Yeah.
I mean, it's if you need an instructive example of sort of how one sync can kind of change your life. I mean, Alabama 3 has some other great music, but I think it's fair to say most people on the street, if you ask them to name one of their other tracks, they'd struggle. But everyone, or at least everyone with good taste, has seen The Sopranos and sorry, Sean, and recognizes that song. So I think it's an a really powerful example of sort of the transformative power of getting the right sync in the right place, how it can essentially launch a band's career.
Yeah, that's another amazing example, and it actually, and if anyone has any more questions, we're approaching the end of this session. It's gone very fast, but do fire them over, and we will make sure we pick them up before we finish. But one thing Sean Dance just made me think of, talking about the power of that one sync in the right place at the right time, is what have these relationships done for you as a musician? You say it makes up about 20-30% of your income, but for how you feel, how you approach being a musician, what have these relationships done for you?
Well, I mean, there's a merger of kind of my passion and my work, right? And that's a career in music. And so it's forged friendships along the way, which are kind of, I mean, that's kind of part of it, like music is one of those rare professions where, your work colleagues can become friends. So there's that sort of like mutually beneficial relationship. In terms of what these syncs have done for me, I think, like, professionally speaking, this extends a little bit to, I can't remember who asked your question, but it was about how to approach companies. Unless you're Hans Zimmer or someone, I don't think the grind really stops. I think you always got to keep pushing, got to keep pushing. And I think, landing things here and there and being able to, for lack of a better phrase, name drop certain productions that you've been involved with. Yeah, that's going to, like, that's going to elevate you a little bit, when you kind of, especially when you approach supervisors cold, or any sort of, kind of directors and whatnot. But yeah, I think that's how it's made life a little easier for me. But like I say, for me, yeah, it's a career, but I mean, it's my marriage as well, and yeah, it's as cheesy as it sounds, it's my life now, so yes, the career components are fantastic, but also the long-term relationships that you forge with the people that you work with are wonderful things as well.
I think that's a great way to think about it, and that kind of brings us to the last thing I wanted to talk about with both of you, really. And we've covered a lot of ground in not much time here. We've had great questions coming through. There'll be a lot of people listening and watching right now who are thinking, right, I really need to focus on this whole part of the music industry and the creative industries I hadn't thought about before. You've opened my eyes to the possibilities. So if we could leave people with, one, golden nugget of advice from the last hour of these conversations, what would that be? Dan, I'm going to come to you first if I can.
Sure. I mean, I suggest to any artist I work with to think about sync as part of your career and as part of your kind of general roadmap for how you're developing as an artist. You know, you don't have to write for sync as Sean does, but if you have music that you've already made, there's in a sense, there's nothing to lose. So if you can, you know, either build your own direct relationships, work with your label or your publisher, find a sync agent like me, or there's plenty of others who are, you know, fantastic. I mean, I guess my biggest advice, and I suppose anyone who's here at the panel is already thinking about sync a little bit, but one of the things I've learned is, you know, you can be in Wales, you can be in Los Angeles, you can be in Timbuktu. It kind of doesn't matter in a way. And this is, you know, especially as we're, you know, I'm guessing this has probably been touched upon in other panels, but I mean, with COVID, you know, touring and live shows are struggling. This is one of the sort of few parts of the music industry that's still kind of keeping its head above water. So, you know, if you're a touring artist and that's your focus normally, and you can't do that, why not take some of that time and kind of put a little effort into you know, having a plan for sync and how you want to approach people with it. The one other piece of advice I'd give, which we touched upon earlier, is metadata. Just making sure that you, when you're reaching out to people, that you're tagging your songs, making sure you're really clear about who the rights holders are, and just presenting the information and the material in as sort of as clean and simple of a fashion as possible, because it will increase your chances. End of story.
And Sean, from the perspective of the artist, what's the one piece of advice you'd give to your fellow artists watching now?
I mean, one piece of advice is a little tricky, you know.
I'll stretch to two.
No, it's okay. I think one thing I've always held on to is how you deal with a no and how you deal with the rejection is as if not more important with how you deal with a yes, because you'll be getting a hell of a lot of no's. However, the vast majority of the relationships that I've founded or that I've kind of, you know, that I've established in my life, they're based on no's, but just no's that I took very, very well, you know, and, you know, it's not always going to come off, but you just got to be fearless. You got to keep at it, you know, you got to care about it, you know, and it's traversing the fine line between not being precious, but also caring about it as well, you know. So that's something I talk with a lot of people about, is how you cope with your no's is as important as how you cope with the yeses.
I think that's good advice for life, not only for sync. And so a nice point to end it for this evening.
I could do with following that advice myself.
It's been honestly such a pleasure to sort of sit here and join the conversation and listen to the two of you. I've learned so much. I've no doubt everyone watching around the world will have done too. So thank you for being so generous with your time tonight. For everyone watching, thank you for joining in. Thanks for all your questions. And we covered a lot of ground, and this is going to be online, able to revisit, rewatch, keep enjoying, keep sharing. So please do. And enjoy everything that's left about a focus. So again, Sean, Dan, thank you so much. And everybody else, stay safe and well. And hopefully we'll see you all again in real life before too long.
Absolutely.
Sorry about the mess, guys. Sorry about the mess. Yeah, I should have I'm really sorry. I should have tidied up in advance. Yeah. Thank you ever so much, you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.